Well, this week, the grand jury will be looking, of course, at all the events which led up to the death of Len Bias. Pat Collins has put together the whole story.
The Boston Celtics select Len Bias as the Len Bias. If you read the clippings and listened to the sportscasters, Len Bias' life appeared to be a succession of dreams come true. From the playgrounds of Prince George's County to All-Metropolitan at Northwestern High School, to All-American at the University of Maryland, to first-round draft pick of the world champion Boston Celtics. He appeared to be a clean-cut, born-again Christian, the kind of athlete they'd invite to the White House. But the road to fame was not the only path Bias chose to travel. We now retrace the last hours of Len Bias' life, focusing on some of the figures who may prove important in the investigation of his death.
Yeah, I'm in the NBA now. I've got drafted, so now my dream has come true. Now all I have to do is go out and play and set some more goals.
Please come as soon as you can. It's no joke. Okay, Washington Hall, apartment number 1103. You're giving him mouth to mouth. You can hear it now. See what I'm saying? This is Len Bias. You have to get him back to life. There's no way he can die. Seriously, sir. Please come quick.
Wednesday, June 18th, 9:54 p.m. New York Air Flight 67 from Boston arrives at National Airport. On board and in first class, Len Bias and his dad. They're besieged by well-wishers and autograph seekers. 10:45 p.m. Bias drops off his father at the family home in Landover, Maryland. In Boston, Bias said the first thing he wanted to do was get home and see his mom. But when he arrives, his mom's not there.
It's ironic, you won't believe this, but I never got to see him before he died. I didn't. No, I was out, and when I had gotten back, and when I had come back home, they said he had just left. And I always teased him about his long legs. I said, that long leg rascal could have waited for me. And then, we went on, and, they said, well, he said he's going to be back tomorrow, and, we're going to do this, that, and the other.
Bias then drives his silver Datsun sports car back to his dormitory on the campus of the University of Maryland. June 19th, 12:30 a.m. Bias goes to visit a friend, Brian Tribble, at his high-rise apartment close by the Maryland campus. Brian Lee Tribble, a suspected drug dealer who investigators believe supplied cocaine to Bias and other Maryland athletes. 1:15 a.m. Bias and Tribble leave the apartment and stop at the Town Hall Bar and Liquor Store outside the campus. Bias goes inside and buys 2 six-packs of private stock malt liquor and a bottle of cognac. Mike Cogburn, the man on duty, remembers it well. He says he got Lenny's autograph.
He was real happy. He was excited. He said he was out celebrating, and having a good time. He said he just got back from Boston. He was just out, celebrating with his friend. That's what he said.
And you got his autograph?
And then I got his autograph, and we shook hands, and I said, take care, and he said, you bet I will, and then he left.
1:30 a.m. Bias and Tribble drive back to the Maryland campus. They're stopped for speeding by a student law enforcement patrol. The officer recognizes Bias and congratulates him on his success with the Celtics. Then he escorts him back to his dorm. No tickets issued. 1:45 a.m. Bias leaves the dormitory. Football player Keita Covington recalls walking Bias to his car.
I live right here in this building, so he was going out to his car. Matter of fact, it was the opposite of where it is right now, across the way, and I walked right around the corner. Yeah. That was the last I saw him.
2 a.m. Bias visits this woman, Bernadette Holton, at her home on Capitol Hill. Miss Holton told Channel 4 News Bias spent about an hour with her, made some phone calls, and then left. She went on to say that she first met Bias in February 1983. She says she's lent Bias about $3,000 to $4,000. 4 a.m. Len Bias meets a woman by the name of Christina Johnson at a 7-Eleven about a mile from the campus. She says he tries to talk her into going back to the dorm with him, but she refuses. They're together for about 45 minutes, then he leaves. 5 a.m. Bias returns to his dormitory suite at Washington Hall. Inside, teammates Jeff Baxter and Keith Gatlin. They say they were asleep. Up and awake, fellow players David Gregg and Terry Long, and friend Brian Tribble. The PG prosecutor says there's also a woman present. They gather in Long's room. 6:15 a.m. Bias suffers a seizure. He begins shaking. They drag him into the living room, and Terry Long begins CPR. Terry Long tells Channel 4, "You don't realize how strong Lenny was. You see, none of us had ever seen him sick or in that state before. I just kept waiting for him to get up and say he was all right." 6:32 a.m. Brian Tribble, in a slurred voice, calls 911 for help.
Basic County emergency. Yeah, I'd like to have an ambulance come. What room? 1103 Washington Hall. It's an emergency. It's Len Bias. And he just went to Boston, and he needs some assistance. What are you talking about? Huh? What are you talking about? I'm talking about someone needs, Len Bias needs help. Well, it doesn't matter what his name is. What's the problem? He's not breathing right. What's your name? My name is Brian. Brian what? Tribble. Tribble? Yes, sir. What's your phone number, Brian? I'm in Len Bias's room. I don't know the phone number. What's the room number? 1103. 1103? Yes, sir. Sir. Please come quick.
6:50 a.m. Bias is brought by ambulance here to Leland Memorial Hospital, where emergency medical teams begin working to revive him.
8:50 a.m. Len Bias is pronounced dead. He was 22 years old. Stunning news to the people of Washington. Shocking news to sports fans all over. As the news spread, police began an exhaustive investigation into Bias's death, and they discover some strange and startling information. Item 1, the lab report. Traces of cocaine initially found in Bias's urine lead doctors to discover huge amounts of the drug in his blood.
Mr. Bias died of cocaine intoxication, which interrupted the normal electrical activity of his brain, which controlled his heartbeat. This resulted in the sudden onset of seizures and cardiac arrest.
Item 2, the cover-up. Back at Bias's dormitory, police on the scene find things unusually clean.
The scene where Mr. Bias died was completely sanitized. Good word. It was completely sanitized. Nothing was there.
Police search a nearby dumpster and uncover some cocaine, a water pipe, and other drug paraphernalia. Then they learn of a conversation between one of the players in the room and Northwestern High School basketball coach Bob Wagner. Wagner is believed to have told the player that if there were anything funny going on in that room, you'd better clean it up. Item 3, police involvement. In another curious development, District Policeman Johnny Walker shows up at the hospital, but nobody remembers calling him to tell him what happened. Walker says he searched Bias's sports car, but the next day police found about 10 grams of cocaine hidden under the dashboard. Item 4, Lefty's team meeting. Later in the morning, Maryland coach Lefty Driesell calls the players to his house for a prayer meeting. But between prayers, Driesell reportedly tells the team not to talk to police about drugs. Item 5, the mysterious robbery. 7:15 a.m. on the day Bias died, in an apartment in Bladensburg, Julie Walker and her roommate Gail Diamond are getting ready to leave for work.
As they walked out of the apartment, they were confronted by 2 gunmen. The gunmen forced them back inside, tied them up, and ransacked the apartment. Among the items stolen, a safe that reportedly belonged to Brian Tribble. Now, when the police showed up about 8 o'clock, they overheard the women talking, and one of the women said how her boyfriend had tried to save Len Bias's life. But at the time, few people knew about the Bias incident, except those immediately involved.
Inside the grand jury room in Upper Marlboro, 23 men and women will carefully scrutinize the events that led to the death of Lenny Bias. They'll want to know how Len Bias got the drugs, and was there a cover-up of Bias's drug use and the drug use of other Maryland athletes? And how much did Lefty Driesell and other university officials know? And when did they know it?
What this grand jury does could result in dramatic changes in the people and policy and program of athletics here at the University of Maryland. Changes that could affect the course of college athletics throughout the country. I'm Pat Collins, Channel 4 News.